The dust cloud on the horizon caught Sophia Ainsworth's attention as she hung laundry in the yard of Zachary Yates' modest ranch outside Taylor, Texas. Her heart plummeted to her stomach like a stone in a well. 8 months of peace, and the new life she'd built was about to shatter like fine china on a hardwood floor. "Zach," she called, her voice carrying across the yard to where he was repairing a fence post. "Riders coming." It was 1875, and Texas was finally emerging from the chaos of Reconstruction. But for Sophia, the real turmoil had always been closer to home. She'd fled Boston 8 months prior, leaving behind her family's suffocating wealth and their plans to marry her off to a business associate 3 decades her senior. Zachary dropped his tools and strode toward her, his tall frame casting a long shadow in the late afternoon sun. At 26, he had already carved out a respectable homestead for himself through sheer determination and hard work. The day Sophia had stumbled into Taylor on the stagecoach, exhausted and desperate, he'd been delivering cattle to market. Their first meeting at the general store had sparked something neither expected. "How many?" he asked, squinting toward the approaching riders. "4, maybe 5, she replied, wiping her hands nervously on her apron. "It's them, Zach, I know it is." He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Let's not jump to conclusions. Could be just passing through." But Sophia knew better. The Ainsworth family didn't simply allow its property to escape, and in their eyes, that's exactly what she was. As the riders drew closer, there was no mistaking the expensive tailored clothing or the rigid postures of men unaccustomed to long journeys by horseback. Leading them was her father, Elliot Ainsworth, his silver hair and beard neatly trimmed despite the dust of travel. Beside him rode her older brother Thomas, and behind them were 2 men she recognized as her father's business associates. "Get inside," Zachary said quietly. "No," Sophia stood her ground. "I won't hide." He nodded, respecting her decision, though she could see the concern in his eyes. They'd known this day might come, had discussed it during the quiet evenings they'd spent together over the past months. What had begun as Zachary offering her a job as housekeeper had gradually blossomed into something deeper, sweeter, and entirely unexpected. The riders pulled up in front of the house. Her father's face was a storm cloud as he dismounted. "Sophia," he called, not bothering with pleasantries, "your little adventure has gone on quite long enough. Your mother is beside herself with worry." She doubted that very much. Her mother, Victoria, had always been more concerned with social standing than maternal affection. "I sent letters. You knew I was safe." "Letters," Thomas scoffed. "Scribbled notes saying you wouldn't be returning but not to worry. That hardly counts as proper correspondence." Elliot's gaze shifted to Zachary, sizing him up with the practiced eye of a man accustomed to evaluating assets. "I presume you're the reason my daughter has lost her senses." "Your daughter," Zachary said calmly, "is a grown woman capable of making her own decisions. She hasn't lost anything except perhaps the chains you placed on her." One of the business associates chuckled. "Quite poetic for a cowboy." "Mr. Yates," her father said, ignoring the comment, "I understand you might have developed certain expectations regarding my daughter's situation. I'm prepared to compensate you for any inconvenience her departure might cause." Sophia felt her cheeks flush with anger and embarrassment. "Father, $500, her father continued, pulling an envelope from his coat. "A generous amount for a few months of hospitality." Zachary didn't even glance at the envelope. "Miss Ainsworth isn't for sale." "Everything has a price," Thomas interjected. "Name yours." "Get off my property," Zachary replied, his voice level but carrying an unmistakable edge. Her father's expression hardened. "Sophia, gather your things." "We're leaving immediately." "No." The word was simple but firm as it left her lips. "This isn't a negotiation," her father snapped. "You have responsibilities in Boston. The Harrington merger depends on your marriage to Frederick. It's been arranged for months." "I never agreed to marry Frederick Harrington," she replied. "He's 52 years old and has buried 2 wives already." "He's a respected businessman with considerable assets," Thomas said, as if that negated everything else. "I'm not going back," Sophia insisted. "I've built a life here." Her father's laugh was harsh. "A life, playing house with a cowboy. Look at this place." He gestured dismissively at the modest ranch house and the surrounding property. "This isn't a life worthy of an Ainsworth." "It's more of a life than I ever had in Boston," she replied. "Here, I'm a person, not a possession to be traded for business advantages." Thomas dismounted and approached her. "Sister, be reasonable. This infatuation will pass, but family is forever. Come home before you ruin your reputation entirely." "My reputation," she laughed bitterly. "The only thing that matters to you is how my actions reflect on the family name." "As it should," her father interjected. "Generations of Ainsworths have built our standing in society. You won't throw that away on some frontier fantasy." The tension grew as they argued, voices rising with frustration on both sides. Sophia felt Zachary's steady presence beside her, a silent support that gave her strength. "Enough," her father finally said, his tone shifting to the one he used when closing difficult business deals. "Thomas, help your sister with her belongings. We'll stay in town tonight and begin the journey back tomorrow." Thomas moved toward the house, but Zachary stepped between them. "She's not going anywhere she doesn't want to go," he said quietly. "Stand aside, Cowboy," Thomas ordered. "This is family business." "Sophia is family to me," Zachary replied, his stance unwavering. Her father's patience snapped. "Seize her," he commanded his companions. "We're leaving now." The 2 men dismounted and advanced. Zachary tensed, prepared to defend her, but Sophia moved forward. "If you touch me," she warned, "I'll scream so loudly everyone in Taylor will hear. I'll tell everyone how Elliot Ainsworth kidnapped his own daughter because she refused to be sold into marriage with a man old enough to be her father." The men hesitated, looking to Elliot for guidance. "You wouldn't dare create such a scene," her father said, though uncertainty tinged his voice. "Wouldn't I?" she challenged. "I've changed, father. I'm not the obedient daughter you can intimidate into submission anymore." Thomas looked between them. "Perhaps we should discuss this more calmly." "There's nothing to discuss," her father insisted. "She belongs in Boston with her family." "I belong where I choose to belong," Sophia countered. Zachary stepped forward. "Mr. Ainsworth, I understand your concern for your daughter, but forcing her to leave will only deepen the rift between you." "What would you know of family responsibility?" Elliot scoffed. "More than you might think," Zachary replied evenly. "I lost my parents young and raised my sister until she married. Family isn't about ownership, it's about support and respect." "Respect?" Thomas laughed. "Is that what you call seducing a young woman from a respectable family and keeping her as your housekeeper?" Sophia felt her temper flare. "How dare you? Zachary has shown me nothing but respect since the day we met. He offered me employment when I had nowhere else to go, gave me my own room, and never presumed anything." "And yet here you are, clearly living in sin," her father said coldly. "We are not," she began, but Zachary's hand on her arm stopped her. "You don't owe them explanations," he said quietly. She took a deep breath. "You're right." Her father's face reddened with anger. "This is absurd. Thomas, take her." Before anyone could move, the sound of approaching horses made them all turn. Sheriff Daniel Miller and 2 deputies rode up to the property. The sheriff, A burly man with a salt and pepper mustache and keen eyes that missed little surveyed the tense scene. "Afternoon, folks," he said casually. "Zachary, Miss Ainsworth, got word there might be some trouble out this way." Sophia felt a rush of gratitude toward Martha Wilson, their nearest neighbor, who must have noticed the riders and sent her son to alert the sheriff. "No trouble, Sheriff," her father said smoothly. "Just collecting my daughter to return her to her proper home." The sheriff dismounted, hooking his thumbs in his belt. "Is that so, Miss Ainsworth? Are you wanting to leave with these gentlemen?" "No, Sheriff Miller," she replied firmly. "I'm exactly where I want to be." The sheriff nodded. "Well now, that seems clear enough to me." "This is preposterous," her father sputtered. "She's my daughter." "She's also a grown woman," the sheriff pointed out. "Texas law doesn't allow for forcing adults to go where they don't wish to." "We have papers," Thomas interjected, reaching into his coat. "Medical certificates suggesting she's not of sound mind to make decisions for herself." Sophia gasped. "That's a lie." The sheriff accepted the documents, glancing over them briefly before handing them back. "These aren't valid here, Mr. Ainsworth. They're signed by a Boston physician with no standing in Texas. Besides, Miss Ainsworth has been a respected member of our community for months now. Teaches at our school 3 days a week, doesn't she, Zachary?" "She does," Zachary confirmed. "The children adore her." Her father's frustration was palpable. "This is outrageous. I'll appeal to higher authorities." "You're welcome to try," the sheriff replied. "But until then, I suggest you gentlemen return to town. There's a good hotel where you can rest and consider your options." "This isn't over," her father warned, looking directly at Sophia. "You're making a terrible mistake." "The only mistake I made was not leaving sooner," she replied softly. The standoff continued for a tense moment before her father finally nodded curtly to his companions. They mounted their horses, with Thomas lingering. "Sophia, please," he said, his voice softer than before. "Mother truly is worried." "Tell her I'm well," Sophia replied. "Happier than I've ever been." Thomas sighed, then followed the others as they rode away. The sheriff tipped his hat. "They might try again," he warned. "Might be best if you two aren't alone for the next few days." "We appreciate the warning," Zachary said, shaking the sheriff's hand, "and the intervention." After the sheriff and his deputies departed, Sophia felt her legs weaken as the tension drained from her body. Zachary was immediately at her side, guiding her to the porch steps where she sat heavily. "They found me," she whispered. "After all this time." "They did," he agreed, settling beside her. "But they didn't take you." She looked up at him, seeing the concern in his eyes. "They'll try again. You heard my father. Let them try," he said firmly. "This is your home now, Sophia, if you want it to be." The question hung between them, weighted with everything they'd never quite said aloud during the months they'd shared the ranch house, working side by side, gradually moving from employer and employee to something much more significant. "I do want it," she admitted. "More than anything." He took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "Then we'll make sure they understand that." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the yard, they sat together on the porch, the unspoken depth of their feelings wrapping around them like a shield against whatever might come next. The following morning, Sophia woke before dawn, her sleep having been fitful and haunted by memories of her life in Boston. The walls that had once felt like a refuge now seemed vulnerable. She dressed quickly and made her way to the kitchen, finding Zachary already there, coffee brewing on the stove. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, pouring her a cup. "No," she admitted. "I keep thinking about what they might do next." He nodded, understanding her concern. "I've asked some of the ranch hands to stay close to the house today." Sheriff Miller also said he'd have deputies patrolling the area. She sipped the strong coffee, grateful for his thoughtfulness. I should go to the school. The children will be expecting me. Are you sure that's wise? Concern creased his brow. Your father might try to intercept you. I can't hide, Zach, she said firmly. I won't let them disrupt the life I've built here. After a moment, he nodded. I'll take you there myself and pick you up afterward. And I've asked Sarah Jenkins to stay with you during the lessons. Sarah, the blacksmith's wife and mother of 3 of Sophia's students, was a formidable woman who brooked no nonsense from anyone. Sophia smiled at the thought of her father trying to intimidate Sarah. Thank you, she said, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. For everything. No need for thanks, he replied, his eyes warm as they met hers. We look after our own in Taylor. The small schoolhouse on the edge of town was buzzing with activity when they arrived. Children played in the yard, their laughter a soothing balm to Sophia's troubled spirit. Inside, Sarah Jenkins was already arranging books on the desks. Morning, she called cheerfully. Heard you had some unwelcome visitors yesterday. News traveled fast in small communities. My family from Boston, Sophia confirmed. They want me to return with them. Sarah snorted. Well, they'll have to go through me first, and I warn you, I've got a mean right hook. Just ask my Henry about the time he came home drunk from the saloon. Zachary chuckled. I'll be back at 3, he told Sophia, his hand lingering on her arm. Be careful. The day passed without incident, though Sophia found herself glancing repeatedly at the windows, expecting to see her father's stern face or her brother's disapproving scowl. The children, sensing her distraction, were unusually well behaved. As promised, Zachary arrived precisely at 3, just as she was dismissing the class. His relief at finding her safe was evident in the way his shoulders relaxed when their eyes met. Any sign of them? She asked as they walked to his wagon. They're still in town, he confirmed. Your father spent the morning at the telegraph office, then with Judge Wilson. Anxiety fluttered in her stomach. The judge? What does that mean? Nothing good, Zachary admitted as he helped her into the wagon. But Sheriff Miller is keeping an eye on things. As they drove through town, Sophia felt the weight of curious stares. Word of her family's arrival had clearly spread, and now she was the subject of whispered conversations and speculative glances. Outside the mercantile, she spotted Thomas in conversation with the bank manager, Mr. Peterson. They're trying to gather allies, she murmured. And failing, Zachary replied. Peterson's wife is on the school board. She thinks you're the best teacher they've ever had. His confidence bolstered her spirits, but as they passed the hotel, she saw her father standing on the porch, watching their progress with cold calculation in his eyes. He made no move to approach, but his presence was a silent promise that this conflict was far from resolved. Back at the ranch, they found Martha Wilson waiting for them, her wagon loaded with food. Thought you might appreciate not having to cook tonight, she said, helping Sophia down. And I brought some news. Your father's been asking questions all over town, trying to find anything he can use against you or Zachary. What kind of questions? Zachary asked, unloading the covered dishes Martha had brought. About your living arrangements mostly, Martha replied. Trying to stir up scandal, I reckon. But nobody's giving him what he wants to hear. We all know you're a gentleman, Zachary Yates, even if some of us think you should get on with proposing to this lovely girl before someone else does. Sophia felt her cheeks flush as Zachary cleared his throat awkwardly. Martha, you're as subtle as a charging bull. Martha laughed, unrepentant. At my age, I haven't got time for dancing around topics. Now, let's get this food inside before it gets cold. Over dinner, Martha shared more town gossip, including the fact that Elliot Ainsworth had offered Judge Wilson a substantial donation for the new courthouse if he would support the family's claim to Sophia. Judge sent him packing with a flea in his ear, Martha reported with satisfaction. Told him Texas judges couldn't be bought, especially not to violate a woman's right to choose her own path. That won't stop my father, Sophia said quietly. He's not accustomed to failure. Neither am I, Zachary replied, his voice steady, and I've got more at stake. The look that passed between them made Martha smile knowingly, but she refrained from further comment on their relationship. After Martha left, promising to return the next day with more news, Sophia and Zachary sat on the porch swing, watching the stars emerge in the deepening twilight. The night was peaceful, with only the distant lowing of cattle and the chirp of crickets disturbing the silence. "What will we do if they won't leave?" Sophia asked finally. Zachary was quiet for a moment, considering. "We could leave instead, start fresh somewhere they couldn't find you." The offer touched her deeply. She knew how much this land meant to him, how hard he'd worked to build his ranch. "I couldn't ask you to give up everything you've built here." "You're not asking," he pointed out. "I'm offering. This land matters to me, but you matter more." The simple declaration hung between them, profound in its honesty. Sophia leaned against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that," she said softly. "This is our home." The emphasis on "our" wasn't lost on him. His arm tightened around her shoulders in silent acknowledgement. "Whatever comes," he promised, "we'll face it together." The next 3 days passed in a strange state of suspended tension. Sophia continued teaching at the school, always with Zachary or one of their friends nearby. Her father and brother remained in town, engaged in what appeared to be a campaign to undermine her position in the community. They visited local businessmen, church leaders, and anyone else with influence, presenting their case with the polished persuasiveness that had served them well in Boston society. To their evident frustration, the people of Taylor proved remarkably resistant to their efforts. The frontier town had its share of gossips and traditionalists, but it also prized independence and self-determination. A young woman choosing her own path, especially one who contributed to the community as Sophia did, earned more respect than censure. On the 4th day, Zachary rode into town alone to collect supplies and gather news. When he returned, his expression was grim. "They've hired men," he reported as he unloaded the wagon. 4 of them, staying at the cheaper boarding house on the edge of town, rough-looking characters. Sophia felt a chill despite the warm afternoon. "Not for violence, surely. My father abhors physical confrontation." "Maybe not violence," Zachary conceded, "but intimidation at least. Or perhaps they plan to take you by force when I'm not around." That evening, they accepted Sheriff Miller's suggestion that Sophia stay with Martha Wilson for a few days while things settled. Though reluctant to be separated, they both recognized the wisdom of removing her from the isolated ranch house. Martha welcomed her warmly, setting her up in the cozy guest room. "Like having a daughter in the house again," she said, patting Sophia's hand. "Mine are all married with families of their own now." That night, as Sophia prepared for bed, she heard horses approaching the farmhouse. Peering cautiously through the curtains, she saw 2 unfamiliar men dismounting in the yard. Before she could call out a warning, Martha appeared in the doorway, shotgun in hand. "Get back from the window," she instructed calmly, "and hand me those shells from the dresser." Heart pounding, Sophia did as she was told, watching as Martha loaded the shotgun with practiced ease. "You know how to shoot?" Martha asked. "No," Sophia admitted. "Time you learned," Martha replied, handing her a revolver from her pocket. "It's loaded, but the safety's on. Only use it if they get past me, which they won't." A heavy knock sounded at the door. Martha positioned herself at the top of the stairs. "State your business," she called down. "Looking for Sophia Ainsworth," a gruff voice replied. "Her father sent us to escort her back to town." "At this hour?" Martha's tone was scathing. "Decent folks don't come calling after dark unless it's an emergency." "It is an emergency," the man insisted. "Family matter." "Well, there's no Ainsworth here," Martha replied. "Just me and my shotgun, which is pointed right at the door." "I suggest you gentlemen leave before I decide you're trespassing." There was a muttered conversation outside, then the sound of retreating footsteps and horses riding away. Martha lowered the shotgun with a satisfied nod. "They'll be back, probably with reinforcements. We should send word to Zachary and the sheriff." She moved to the window where a lantern burned on the sill. Calmly, she blew it out, then lit it again, repeating the process 3 times before leaving it dark. "Signal to my neighbor," she explained. "He'll get word to town." Within an hour, Zachary arrived with Sheriff Miller and 2 deputies. Martha recounted the visit while Sophia made coffee for everyone. "They're getting desperate," the sheriff observed, "which makes them dangerous." "I don't understand why they won't accept my decision," Sophia said, frustration evident in her voice. "I'm 20 years old, not a child." "It's not about you," Zachary said quietly. "It's about control. Men like your father can't stand losing it." The sheriff nodded agreement. "We'll post a deputy here tonight, but this can't go on indefinitely. We need to resolve the situation." "How?" Sophia asked. "Confrontation," Zachary suggested. "On our terms, not theirs." They spent the next hour developing a plan. The following morning, Sheriff Miller would formally invite Elliot and Thomas Ainsworth to a meeting at the town hall, with Judge Wilson presiding. Sophia would state her intentions clearly, with witnesses present. If her family still refused to accept her decision, the sheriff would warn them about the legal consequences of harassment and attempted abduction. "It might work," the sheriff said, "if they're rational men who respect the law." "My father respects power," Sophia replied. "Show him you have it and he'll back down." As the men prepared to leave, Zachary took Sophia aside, his expression serious. "There's something else we should consider," he said, taking her hands in his. "Something that would make your position here even more secure." She met his gaze, understanding dawning. "Marriage?" he nodded. "I know it's sudden and perhaps not how you imagined it, but yes," she interrupted, her heart suddenly light despite the circumstances. "Yes, I will marry you, Zachary Yates." A slow smile spread across his face. "You're sure?" "I don't want you to feel pressured." "I've never been more certain of anything," she assured him. "Though I admit, I did imagine a slightly more romantic proposal." He laughed softly, drawing her into his arms. "When this is over, I promise to do it properly, down on one knee and everything." "I'll hold you to that," she whispered against his chest. The next morning brought clear skies and a sense of purpose. Sophia dressed carefully in her best blue dress, her hair neatly arranged. Martha insisted on lending her a cameo brooch for luck, pinning it at her throat with motherly care. They arrived at the town hall to find it already crowded. Word of the meeting had spread, and it seemed half the town had turned out to witness the confrontation. Sophia spotted her father and brother seated near the front, their expressions stoic. The 4 hired men stood against the wall behind them, their presence a silent threat. Judge Wilson called the meeting to order, his authoritative voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. "We're gathered to address a private matter that has become a public concern," he announced. "Mr. Elliot Ainsworth of Boston has come to retrieve his daughter, Sophia. Miss Ainsworth has indicated she wishes to remain in Taylor. As this disagreement has led to actions bordering on harassment and intimidation, I've agreed to moderate this discussion." Elliot Ainsworth rose, every inch the Boston patriarch in his tailored suit. "I appreciate your involvement, Judge Wilson, though I maintain this is a family matter requiring no outside intervention. My daughter has been away from home for 8 months, causing great distress to her mother and confusion among our social circles. It is time she returned to fulfill her responsibilities." Judge Wilson nodded. "Miss Ainsworth, would you care to respond?" Sophia stood, conscious of all eyes upon her. "Thank you, Judge Wilson. 8 months ago, I left Boston because my father arranged a marriage for me without my consent. The prospective groom was Frederick Harrington, a business associate of my father's, aged 52. I was informed of this arrangement at a dinner party, where my father announced our engagement without having discussed it with me privately. Murmurs of disapproval rippled through the crowd. I came to Texas seeking independence," she continued. "In Taylor, I found not only freedom but a community that values me for my contributions rather than my family name or potential as a business asset. I teach at the school, assist with the church charity work, and have built meaningful relationships with many people here. This is my home now, and I have no intention of leaving it." Her father's face darkened. "You speak of responsibilities to this community, but what of your responsibilities to your family? The alliance with the Harringtons would secure the futures of dozens of employees who depend on our business for their livelihoods." "I sympathize with their situation," Sophia replied evenly, "but I cannot sacrifice my life for your business interests." "Surely there are other ways to secure the alliance without treating me as currency in the transaction." Thomas rose to stand beside their father. "Sophia, you've always been headstrong, but this defiance goes beyond childish rebellion. Consider Mother's health. Your absence has exacerbated her nervous condition." "My mother's nervous condition has been her excuse to avoid unpleasantness for as long as I can remember," Sophia countered. "I've written to her regularly, explaining my situation. If she is truly unwell, I'm sorry for it, but I won't be emotionally manipulated into returning." Judge Wilson cleared his throat. "Mr. Ainsworth, your daughter is of legal age to determine her own residence and associations. Unless you can demonstrate that she is incompetent or being held against her will, you have no legal standing to compel her return to Boston." "She is being influenced," Elliot insisted, pointing at Zachary. "This Cowboy has filled her head with romantic nonsense, luring her away from her proper place in society." Zachary stood, his quiet dignity a stark contrast to Elliot's growing agitation. "Sir, I've never influenced Sophia against her family. When she arrived in Taylor, she was already determined not to return to Boston. I offered her employment when she needed it, and over time, our relationship has developed into something more. But her decisions have always been her own." Sheriff Miller stepped forward. "Judge Wilson, I'd like to address the matter of the hired men Mr. Ainsworth has brought to town. Last night, 2 of them attempted to enter Martha Wilson's home, where Miss Ainsworth was staying, with the stated intention of taking her back to town." Elliot waved dismissively. "I sent them to check on her welfare. After dark with no prior notice," the sheriff questioned. "That sounds more like an attempted abduction." "Absurd," Elliot scoffed. "They were merely messengers." "Messengers don't usually carry concealed weapons," the sheriff noted. The tension in the room escalated as the implications of this statement sank in. Judge Wilson banged his gavel to restore order. "Mr. Ainsworth, if your men have threatened or attempted to coerce your daughter in any way, that would constitute a serious legal offense in Texas." "No threats were made," Elliot insisted. "But a father has rights not to force an adult daughter to marry against her will," Judge Wilson interrupted firmly. "Not in this jurisdiction." Sophia felt Zachary move to stand beside her, his presence lending her strength as the confrontation continued. "There is another matter I wish to address," she said, her clear voice cutting through the tension. "Zachary Yates has asked me to marry him, and I have accepted. We intend to build our life together here in Taylor." The announcement caused a fresh wave of murmurs through the crowd, most of them approving. Several of the townspeople called out congratulations. Elliot's face flushed with anger. "This is preposterous. You cannot possibly intend to throw away your future on a hard-working, honorable man who respects me and values my happiness." Sophia finished for him. "Yes, father, that is exactly what I intend to do." Thomas looked between his father and sister, conflict evident on his face. For the first time, he seemed to be truly seeing her determination rather than dismissing it as willfulness. "Sophia," he said quietly, "are you absolutely certain this is what you want? Not just the man, but this life. It's so different from everything you've known." "I've never been more certain," she replied. "I've found purpose here, Thomas. Real connections with people who see me as I am, not as they wish me to be." He nodded slowly, then turned to their father. "Perhaps we should accept her decision." "Never," Elliot snapped. "I will not allow the Ainsworth name to be tarnished by this frontier farce." Judge Wilson had heard enough. "Mr. Ainsworth, let me be perfectly clear. Your daughter is free to make her own choices. Any attempt to remove her from this town against her will would be met with the full force of the law. I suggest you accept the situation with whatever grace you can muster." For a moment, Elliot seemed ready to continue arguing, but something in the judge's expression and the unified front of the townspeople gave him pause. He looked around the room, recognizing the futility of his position. "Very well," he said coldly. "If she chooses to abandon her heritage and responsibilities, so be it. But understand this, Sophia. If you proceed with this ill-advised union, you do so without the Ainsworth name or resources. You will be cut off completely." The threat hung in the air, but Sophia merely smiled. "I've managed without your resources for 8 months, father. I suspect I'll continue to do just fine." Thomas stepped forward. "Father, this accomplishes nothing except ensuring Sophia will never return, even for a visit. Is that really what you want?" For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Elliot's face. Despite his rigid exterior, Sophia knew he did care for her in his own controlling way. "She's made her choice," he said stiffly. "As have you," Thomas replied. Then, turning to Sophia, "I hope you'll still write to Mother. And perhaps to me as well. I'd like to know my sister, even if we live different lives." Sophia nodded, touched by this unexpected olive branch. "I'd like that too, Thomas." With the confrontation effectively diffused, Judge Wilson concluded the meeting. The crowd began to disperse, many pausing to congratulate Sophia and Zachary on their engagement. Martha Wilson was among the first, embracing Sophia warmly. "Knew he'd come to his senses eventually," she said, beaming. "Though it took a Boston invasion to push him into action." As the town hall emptied, Sophia noticed her father and brother preparing to leave. Impulsively, she approached them, with Zachary respectfully hanging back to give them privacy. "Will you return to Boston immediately?" she asked. Her father's expression remained severe. "There's nothing to keep us here. I meant what I said about writing to Mother," she told Thomas. "And I'd welcome letters from both of you if you're willing. This doesn't have to be a complete severance." Thomas glanced at their father, then back to Sophia. "I'll make sure Mother receives your letters. As for Father, time may soften his position." Elliot straightened his jacket, avoiding her gaze. "You've made your choice, Sophia. Now you must live with it." "I intend to," she replied calmly. "Happily." Without another word, he walked away. Thomas lingered a moment longer, He's proud, Sophia. It makes it hard for him to accept defeat. This isn't about winning or losing, she said. It's about living authentically. Thomas smiled wryly. A concept foreign to Ainsworth men, I'm afraid, but perhaps not entirely. He hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, your cowboy seems like a decent man. I hope he makes you happy." "He does," she assured him, "more than I ever imagined possible." With a nod that conveyed more understanding than she'd expected, Thomas followed their father out of the town hall. Zachary joined her, his hand finding hers. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. She watched through the window as her father and brother mounted their horses, the hired men following suit. "Yes," she said, surprising herself with the truth of it. "I am." As her family rode away, Sophia felt not loss but liberation. The confrontation she'd feared for months was over, and she had emerged stronger for it. Her life in Taylor, with its small school, community of friends, and the ranch she'd come to think of as home, stretched before her, full of promise. "What now?" Zachary asked, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. She turned to him, smiling. "Now, Mr. Yates, I believe you owe me a proper proposal." His answering smile was warm enough to chase away any lingering shadows. "Yes, madam, I surely do." 3 weeks later, with the threat of her family's intervention finally behind them, Sophia stood in Martha Wilson's guest room, adjusting the simple white dress she'd chosen for her wedding day. The dress was new, ordered from a catalog and rushed by the dressmaker in Austin, but she wore Martha's lace veil, Sarah Jenkins's pearl earrings, and a blue ribbon from one of her students around her bouquet of wildflowers. A knock at the door announced Martha, who entered with misty eyes. "Oh, my dear, you look absolutely beautiful." "Thank you," Sophia said, smoothing the skirt nervously. "And thank you for everything these past weeks, for taking me in, for helping with the wedding preparations." "Hush now," Martha said, adjusting the veil. "Your family to me, girl, have been since you first arrived in Taylor with that determined look in your eyes." The church bells began to ring, signaling it was time. Martha handed Sophia her bouquet. "Ready to become Mrs. Yates?" With a deep breath and a joyful heart, Sophia nodded. "More than ready." The small church was filled to capacity with the people of Taylor. Zachary waited at the altar, looking handsome in his new suit, his expression one of awe as Sophia walked down the aisle. Sheriff Miller had offered to escort her, but she'd chosen to walk alone, symbolizing her independent choice to join her life with Zachary's. The ceremony was simple, but heartfelt. As they exchanged vows, Sophia felt the rightness of their union in every fiber of her being. This was where she belonged, not in a grand Boston mansion, but in a small Texas town, with a man whose strength came not from wealth or position but from character and conviction. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss your bride." Zachary's kiss was tender, a promise of all the years to come. The church erupted in cheers and applause as they turned to face their friends as a married couple. The celebration afterward was a true community affair, held in the town square with tables laden with food contributed by nearly every household. There was music, dancing, and so much laughter that Sophia's cheeks ached from smiling. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the festivities, she found herself momentarily alone, watching Zachary as he chatted with friends across the square. "He's a good man," Sheriff Miller said, appearing at her side with a glass of punch. "You chose well, Mrs. Yates." The new name sent a thrill through her. "Yes, I did," she agreed, "though I sometimes wonder if it was really a choice or simply recognition of what was meant to be." The sheriff chuckled. "Fancy way of saying fate, isn't it? Well, whatever brought you two together, the town is better for it." As the evening progressed, Zachary found her for another dance, pulling her close as the music slowed. "Happy," he murmured against her hair. "Completely," she assured him. "Though I'll be happier still when we're home." His eyes darkened at the implication. After months of propriety, with Sophia in her separate room and Zachary careful never to overstep boundaries that might fuel town gossip, tonight they would finally be truly alone as husband and wife. "Perhaps we should make our farewells," he suggested, his voice husky. They said their goodbyes, accepting final congratulations and well wishes before climbing into the wagon that would take them back to the ranch, their ranch now, in name as well as fact. The moon was rising as they traveled the familiar road, bathing the landscape in silver light. "I received a letter today," Sophia said as they neared home. "From Thomas." Zachary glanced at her, surprised. "Good news or bad?" "A bit of both," she replied. "He wrote that Father has officially removed me from his will as he threatened. But Thomas also sent a draft for $1,000, his own money," he said, "an early wedding gift that Father doesn't know about." "That's generous of him," Zachary said. "What will you do with it?" she smiled. "We could expand the school, hire another teacher so I can still help with the ranch. Or perhaps put it aside for our future children's education." The mention of children brought a warm glow to Zachary's expression. "I like the sound of that." As they approached the ranch, Sophia noticed something unusual. Lanterns burned in the windows and the porch was decorated with ribbons and flowers. "What's this?" she asked, puzzled. Zachary's smile was mysterious. "A surprise. The ranch hands insisted on preparing something special for our return." They pulled up to the house, and Sophia saw that the entire porch had been transformed into a bower of flowers. A small table was set with cake and wine, and a banner hung above the door reading, "Welcome home, Mr. and Mrs. Yates." "Oh, Zach," she breathed. "It's beautiful." He helped her down from the wagon, but instead of leading her to the porch, he swept her into his arms, cradling her against his chest. "Zachary," she laughed, wrapping her arms around his neck. "What are you doing?" "Carrying my wife across the threshold," he replied, mounting the steps with ease. "It's tradition." Inside, she found more surprises. The main room had been cleaned until it gleamed, with fresh curtains at the windows and new cushions on the chairs. Vases of wildflowers stood on every surface, filling the house with their sweet scent. "When did you arrange all this?" she asked, amazed. "I had help," he admitted, setting her gently on her feet. "Martha organized most of it while we were at the celebration." Sophia turned slowly, taking in the home that was now truly theirs to share. In the 8 months since she'd first arrived, the ranch house had transformed from a place of refuge to the center of her world. "It's perfect," she said softly. Zachary moved behind her, his arms encircling her waist. "Welcome home, Mrs. Yates." She leaned back against him, savoring the solid warmth of his body against hers. "Home," she repeated. "Yes, that's exactly what it is." Later that night, as they lay entwined in what was now their shared bedroom, Sophia traced the contours of her husband's face in the moonlight streaming through the window. "Did you ever imagine when I first arrived in Taylor that we would end up here?" she asked. He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Not at first. You were so different from anyone I'd ever met, educated, refined. I thought you'd stay just long enough to catch your breath before moving on to somewhere more suitable for an Ainsworth. And when did that change?" He smiled, remembering. "The day of the spring storm when the creek flooded. You spent hours helping Martha salvage what she could from her root cellar, covered in mud from head to toe and never once complaining. That's when I knew you weren't just passing through. You were putting down roots." She nodded, recalling that day vividly. "That's when I knew, too, that I belonged here with these people, with you though I wasn't ready to admit it yet." "And now," he asked, pulling her closer. "Now I can't imagine being anywhere else," she whispered against his lips. As spring gave way to summer and summer to fall, Sophia and Zachary settled into the rhythm of married life. The ranch prospered under their joint care, with Zachary managing the cattle and Sophia overseeing an expanding vegetable garden and a small flock of chickens. She continued teaching at the school 3 days a week, finding deep fulfillment in watching her students' progress. Letters arrived occasionally from Thomas, bringing news from Boston. Their mother's health had improved once she accepted Sophia's decision, and she had even begun to show interest in her daughter's new life, requesting photographs and asking detailed questions about Texas in her own infrequent letters. Elliot remained intransigent, refusing to speak Sophia's name, but Thomas hinted that even his resolve might be weakening as time passed. In late October, as the first cool breezes hinted at the coming winter, Sophia confirmed what she had suspected for several weeks. She was expecting their first child, due in early summer. Zachary's joy at the news was boundless. He immediately set about making plans for a nursery, ordering a rocking chair from the carpenter in town, and spending evenings crafting a small wooden cradle with his own hands. The news spread quickly through Taylor, bringing a fresh wave of community support. Martha Wilson began knitting baby clothes, while Sarah Jenkins offered practical advice about childbirth and infant care. Even Sheriff Miller contributed, presenting them with a finely carved wooden horse he'd made himself. "For when the little one's old enough to appreciate it," he said gruffly, clearly embarrassed by the sentiment behind the gift. As Sophia's pregnancy progressed, she wrote to her mother and brother with the news. Thomas responded promptly with congratulations and another generous gift. Victoria's letter arrived a month later, tentative but warm, expressing her hope that she might one day meet her grandchild. Winter passed with Sophia and Zachary cozy in their home, planning for the future and deepening their bond with each passing day. On particularly cold evenings, they would sit before the fire, his hand resting protectively on her growing belly, feeling the baby's movements and speculating about whether they would have a son or daughter. "Either way," Zachary often said, "the child will have your spirit and determination." "And your kindness," Sophia would reply. "Your sense of justice." Spring brought renewal to the land and increasing anticipation to their home. By May, with the baby's arrival drawing near, they had transformed a small room off their bedroom into a nursery, painted pale yellow and furnished with everything a child might need. Early one morning in June, as the first rays of sun streaked the eastern sky, Sophia woke to the unmistakable signs that her time had come. Martha Wilson and the town's midwife were summoned, while Zachary paced anxiously outside the bedroom door, barred from entry by Martha's firm insistence that menfolk were no use at all in a birthing room. After 6 hours of labor, longer than some but shorter than many for a first child, Sophia gave birth to a healthy son with a shock of dark hair and his father's strong chin. When Zachary was finally allowed to enter, the sight of his wife holding their child left him momentarily speechless. "Come meet your son," Sophia said softly, tired but radiant. He approached the bed cautiously, overwhelmed by the tiny life they had created together. When she placed the swaddled infant in his arms, his eyes filled with tears. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "I'm your pa." They named him Samuel Thomas Yates, honoring both Zachary's late father and Sophia's brother who had shown unexpected understanding. The boy thrived, growing strong on his mother's milk and the fresh air of the Texas countryside. When Samuel was 2 months old, an unexpected letter arrived from Boston. It was from Elliot Ainsworth, the handwriting so familiar that Sophia's hands trembled as she opened it. The message was brief but significant. "Sophia, your mother tells me I have a grandson. While I still believe you made a grievous error in judgment, I find I cannot maintain my silence in the face of this news. If you and your husband would permit it, your mother and I would like to visit Taylor to meet the child. Please inform us if this would be acceptable." Father Sophia shared the letter with Zachary, uncertain how to respond. After all the conflict, the idea of her parents in their home was unsettling. "What do you want to do?" he asked. Always respectful of her decisions regarding her family, she considered carefully. I think I would like them to meet Samuel. Not for their sake, but for his. He should know his family, all of his family." "Then write to them," Zachary said simply. "Tell them they are welcome as long as they come with open minds and peaceful intentions." The reply came swiftly. Elliot and Victoria would arrive by train in 2 weeks, staying at the hotel in town rather than imposing on the ranch house. The formality of the arrangement actually eased Sophia's concerns. Having her parents as house guests might have been too much too soon. The day of their arrival brought understandable anxiety. Sophia dressed Samuel in his finest clothes, a little suit Martha had painstakingly sewn for the occasion. She herself wore a pretty blue dress that Zachary particularly liked, her hair arranged neatly, but without the elaborate styling her mother had always preferred. They met at the hotel restaurant, a neutral location that seemed appropriate for this tentative reconciliation. When Sophia entered with Samuel in her arms and Zachary at her side, she spotted her parents immediately. Victoria rose at once, her face lighting up at the sight of her grandson. Elliot remained seated, his expression guarded but his eyes fixed on the child. "Mother, father," Sophia said, her voice steady, "I'd like you to meet your grandson, Samuel Thomas Yates, and of course my husband, Zachary." Victoria approached first, her hands outstretched. "Oh, Sophia, he's beautiful." "Would you like to hold him?" Sophia offered. The joy in her mother's face as she cradled Samuel was genuine and touching. Elliot watched for a moment before standing and extending his hand to Zachary. "Mr. Yates," he said formally, "I believe we've not been properly introduced despite our previous encounters." Zachary shook his hand firmly. "Mr. Ainsworth, welcome to Taylor." The initial awkwardness gradually eased as they shared a meal together. Victoria was clearly enchanted with Samuel, cooing and smiling whenever he looked her way. Elliot was more reserved, but Sophia caught him studying the baby with undisguised interest, noting aloud that the boy had the Ainsworth forehead. After dinner, they walked through the town, Sophia pointing out the school where she taught and introducing her parents to various townspeople they encountered. The citizens of Taylor, who had rallied so firmly behind Sophia during the confrontation a year earlier, were polite if somewhat cautious with the Ainsworths. "Your community seems quite cohesive," Elliot observed as they walked back toward the hotel. "It is," Sophia agreed. "People here depend on each other. It creates strong bonds. Different from Boston society," he noted. "Very different," she acknowledged, "but no less valuable." The visit continued for 3 days, with Elliot and Victoria coming out to the ranch to see how their daughter lived. Sophia watched her father take in the modest house, the well-tended garden, the small herd of cattle in the distance. She knew he was comparing it to the mansion she'd left behind, finding it wanting in luxury, but perhaps recognizing other qualities in its place. On the final evening before her parents' departure, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Elliot cleared his throat. "Sophia, I owe you an apology," he said, the words clearly difficult for him. "I was wrong to try to force you to return to Boston, and I was mistaken about your husband." She waited, knowing how rare such admissions were from her father. "You've built a good life here," he continued. "Different from what I envisioned for you, but substantial in its own way." "Thank you, Father," she said simply. "That means a great deal to me." Victoria reached over to squeeze her hand. "We miss you, my dear. But seeing you here with your family and your community, I understand why you chose to stay." "You'll always be welcome to visit," Sophia told them. "And perhaps someday, when Samuel is older, we could visit Boston so he can see where his mother grew up." "We would like that very much," Victoria said warmly. As they said their goodbyes the next morning at the train station, Elliot awkwardly requested to hold his grandson. Sophia placed Samuel in his arms, watching as her father's stern features softened while looking down at the baby. "He's a fine boy," Elliot said, his voice gruff with emotion. "You've done well, Sophia." It wasn't a complete reconciliation. Too much had transpired for all wounds to heal immediately. But it was a beginning, a bridge between the life she'd left behind and the one she'd chosen for herself. As the train pulled away, carrying her parents back to Boston, Sophia stood between her husband and son, feeling a sense of completeness that had once seemed impossible. The journey that had begun with her desperate flight from an unwanted marriage had led her here, to genuine love and a family of her own making. "Ready to go home?" Zachary asked, his arm around her waist. She looked up at him, this man who had stood in the road and declared her home already when her family tried to drag her back to Boston. The man who had given her not just shelter but understanding, not just protection but partnership. "Yes," she said, leaning into his embrace. "Let's go home." As they walked away from the station, Samuel sleeping peacefully in his father's arms, Sophia reflected on the unexpected path her life had taken. From the sheltered daughter of a Boston businessman to the wife of a Texas rancher, a teacher, a mother. The transformation hadn't always been easy, but standing here now, with the two people she loved most in the world, she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. In the years that followed, the ranch prospered along with their family. 2 more children joined Samuel, a daughter, Elizabeth Martha, born 2 years after her brother, and another son, James William, who arrived 3 years later. The nursery that had been prepared for Samuel was expanded to accommodate the growing family, and Zachary built additional rooms onto the house as their needs increased. Sophia continued teaching, though she reduced her hours at the school after Elizabeth's birth. Her reputation as an educator grew, and eventually she was asked to serve on the school board, where she advocated for expanded educational opportunities for all children in the district, regardless of background or circumstances. Zachary's ranch operations expanded as well, with additional land purchased from neighboring properties and new breeding stock, improving the quality of their cattle. What had begun as a modest homestead evolved into one of the most successful ranches in the county, providing a stable livelihood for their family and employment for several ranch hands. Their connections with the Ainsworth family gradually strengthened. Thomas visited regularly, becoming a beloved uncle to the children and a trusted friend to Zachary. Elliot and Victoria made annual trips to Texas, staying longer each time and becoming increasingly comfortable with the life their daughter had chosen. When Elizabeth was 5, the entire Yates family traveled to Boston for an extended visit, allowing the children to experience the very different world of their maternal grandparents. Taylor itself grew and changed with the times. The railroad brought new opportunities for commerce, and the small frontier town expanded into a bustling community. Through it all, Sophia and Zachary remained central figures, respected for their contributions, and admired for the strong partnership they had forged. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Zachary surprised Sophia by taking her on a picnic to the spot where they had first acknowledged their feelings for each other, a quiet clearing by the creek that ran through their property. As they sat on a blanket beneath the shade of a large oak tree, their children playing nearby under the watchful eye of Martha Wilson's granddaughter, he presented her with a small wooden box. Inside was a delicate gold locket, and when Sophia opened it, she found miniature portraits of their 3 children, expertly painted by an artist in Austin. "To remind you always of what we've built together," Zachary said as he fastened the chain around her neck. "As if I could ever forget," she replied, leaning against him contentedly. "Sometimes I still can't believe how fortunate I am, how different my life might have been if I hadn't found the courage to leave Boston. Or if I hadn't been in town the day you arrived," he added. "Life turns on such small moments." She nodded, watching their children's laughter as they chased butterflies through the wildflowers. "Do you ever regret it, taking in a runaway Boston socialite who knew nothing about ranch life?" His laugh was warm as he pulled her closer. "Best decision I ever made, though you weren't quite as helpless as you're making out. I seem to recall you mastering the art of bread making within weeks, despite burning the first few batches. The chickens appreciated those early attempts," she reminded him with a smile. They fell silent, comfortable in each other's company after a decade of shared life. The afternoon sun filtered through the oak leaves, dappling the ground with patterns of light and shadow. In the distance, they could see their home, the sturdy ranch house that had witnessed their journey from tentative beginnings to established family. "When your father came to take you back," Zachary said reflectively, "and I stood in the road and said you were already home, I meant it with every fiber of my being. But I don't think I fully understood then what home truly meant for us." "What does it mean?" she asked, curious about his thoughts. He considered for a moment. "It's not just the house or the land, though those matter. It's what we've created together, the family, the trust, the life we've built day by day. That's home." She reached up to touch his face, still handsome after years of working under the Texas sun. "I couldn't have said it better myself." As the sun began to set, they gathered their children and the picnic supplies, making their way back to the house where friends and neighbors would soon arrive for an anniversary celebration. The path ahead was illuminated by the golden light of early evening, a fitting metaphor for the life they continued to build together, bright, warm, and full of promise. Sophia Ainsworth Yates, once a reluctant debutante from Boston society, had found her true destiny in the heart of Texas. And Zachary Yates, the steadfast cowboy who had recognized her spirit from the beginning, had gained not just a wife but a partner in every sense. Together, they had created a legacy of love, family, and community that would endure long after the final sunset of their days.